Hello, I'm Elli Wohlgelernter, and we're here on the 20th of August, 2010, an interview with Jack Slomovic, spelled Slomovic. Jack, first let's start with your early days, your birth,
My birth is, I was born in June 12, 1925. Born in, it's called a little town called Slomovic, which it was in the Carpathian Mountains. And that time it was Czechoslovakia. And then during the war, when the war broke out, it became Hungary. And 44, beginning of 44, the Germans took over. And then from then, when they took over, they put us right away in the ghettos. And from the ghettos, we went to Auschwitz.
Tell me about your family as a child.
My family, we were 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. And
what number were you?
I was number 2. My older brother was about 4.5 years older. And he, in the beginning, when the Hungarians came in 1940, he was taken away to labor camp. And from labor camp, he was having support, the labor support for the Hungarian army. And they had uniforms. They were sent to the Russian front. And then they took him as a prisoner of war. The Russians took him as a prisoner of war. And he was in Russia until 45, the end of the war.
Let's go. I just want to talk about your family for a second. What did your parents do?
My father was more in the lumber business. We had the lumber yard, we had a lumber mill, and we had some forests. And we were producing those days almost a lot of the wood products. He was producing like railroad ties. Now they do it with concrete. That time they do it very hard wood. And he was also building some houses because we had a salt mine, which was controlled by the government, and for the workers, they supplied some houses, so he was building some of those houses.
Your family, what kind of a family, what kind of a Jewish family was it?
My family, my grandfather, he was a big chussid. Now it's called Satmar, at that time it was called Sigit chussid. And my father was very religious, not ultra religious, but very quite religious. And the end of before he went to Auschwitz, he was not so religious, was more relaxed. It was very harder for him because he kept on being arrested. He happened to be also the president of the Jewish community, so they kept on taking him away and then release him. And
your mother's family?
My mother's family was also religious, and my mother's family, we lived just about a couple miles apart. It was a border, actually. They lived in the Romanian side. We lived in the Czechoslovakian side. But it was just a couple miles, 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. We used to visit my grandmother. My grandfather, he died after the First World War. Actually, during the First World War, because my brother was named after him. And Elli Wiesel happened to be named because we are cousins. Elli's father and my mother were sister and brother, so they were named after the same grandfather. And also religious. They were different religion which you see today, because today you have much more extremists both ways. So,
what languages did you speak at home?
We spoke at home Yiddish, except with the girls, my mother spoke Hungarian.
Why is that?
I don't know. My mother spoke Hungarian
naturally,
and she was a very, very well-read woman, and she read mostly in Hungarian, almost everything in Hungarian. So she spoke to the girls, and we didn't want to speak Hungarian. The boys didn't want to speak Hungarian, so we spoke Yiddish. So this was our mother tongue.
You went to Cheder?
Yeah, I went to Cheder. Yeah, cheder until about the bar mitzvah. And then we went for about a year and a half, we went different yeshivot, about a couple yeshivot, until I became around 14 and a half. And then I joined my father and did what he did. We didn't have businesses anymore, a licensed business. We did have a lot of businesses, but not licensed. So we had to run it through Hungarian fictitious names, so together like partnerships. So I was involved with that. Was involved also because the food was not available. So we happened to have it was like a little island with a forest. And he cut out the wood and made a farm there. So for farming, they allowed you to have, as long as you give for the government about 75% of the product. So 25% was plenty for us to live on.
What kind of things did you grow?
It grows almost everything. First, we had a lot of cattle. We had about 36 cows. And we had 12 horses. And we had a lot of geese. And vegetables, also wheat was grown there. And I don't think any fruit, don't remember any fruit, but mostly vegetables and wheat and corn, a lot of corn.
Was there a shochet to
Yeah, it was a shochet, yeah. The shochet who used to, the way it was, the shochet was getting his parnusa, because there was no tax. You didn't tax the people except when you went to slaughter the cattle or the chickens or the geese. So they had to buy a ticket and and give it to the shochet. So this is the shochet and the rabbi and the dayan. So these three people used to get paid whatever it came in. So
how far out of town was this little farm?
from the farm, I would say was maybe a couple miles, 2.5 miles.
You walked there to get there?
Yeah, I walked. Well, I used to have a little carriage with a horse, but sometimes we walked, especially when we cut out the trees. We used to have a caravan because it was in winter with sleds. So I used to have to walk with them, see that it goes to the right place. So, but most of the time, the walking took about 45 minutes walk.
And you were in charge of this when you were 15?
No, I was in charge, yeah, when I was 15, 16. And we produced also butter and sour cream and cheeses. Yeah, we had machinery. And this was enough food for the families. We had potatoes, we grew a lot of potatoes also, and all kind of vegetables, whatever they grew those days.
Did you have other family around, cousins?
Had a lot of family, a lot of cousins. Most of my father's side family, I would say at least half of them lived on our town. And the other half lived all over other places. And my mother's family was also close because when the Hungarians, when the war broke out in September, then the Sziget, where the Hungarian side, the Latvian, actually it was the same town. It became split because the river made the border. So we were practically close also with my mother's family because we didn't have, it was one country. The Hungarians went in there and went on to our town.
So you knew Elli Wiesel as a boy?
Oh yeah, we grew up together, yeah.
What do you remember about him as a child? What was he like as a child?
Well, he was a child. He's about 3 years younger than I am. And he was a very studious young man. He learned languages. And he was a very, as a young man, he was already a Talmud Chacham. And he kept to himself. He didn't have too many friends, but he was always studying.
You wouldn't consider yourself a Talmud Chacham?
No. My brothers, especially my older brother, He's a big Talmud Chacham. He was teaching, he was a professor at the University of Judaism. He was teaching Talmud, Midrash, and he was really nationally known, or even internationally known scholar.
Tell me what happened as the war broke out in September.
When the war broke out in September, we just saw a lot of, because the war broke out in Poland, and we saw a lot of Polish army. They went through because the Hungarians, when the war broke out, the Hungarians came into us at the same time. And the Germans took over the Sudeten. So there was no Czechoslovakia anymore. So the caravans, remember the caravans, day and night, were coming from Poland, going towards France, with wagons and cars and trucks. And so this is what I remember in the beginning. And it took about a few days, maybe a week or two. And then it became a different regime. So Hungarians took over. We had to start going to Hungarian schools. And this Hungarian schools, we were only for a couple of years allowed, and then Jews were not allowed anymore to go to school. In fact, my younger sister, she was still graduating middle school. And we were there about 9 years ago, and we went to visit. We went into the house where I grew up. And there she gave me a picture. The woman who lives there, she happened to be graduating the same class with my sister. And I have the graduating picture, and this probably was, I think, in 43, no, maybe 42 or 43. Yeah, she was born, about 42.
And when were you taken to Auschwitz?
We were taken to Auschwitz in May 22 and 44. We were taken to Auschwitz, and there I met, because my father wasn't home. He was arrested almost from the beginning when the Germans came in. So we happened to meet together with my father, my three of the uncles, my younger brother, Elli, Wiesel, and his father. And we kept together, and then they sent us to Buna, which was about 2 or 3 miles away from Auschwitz. We were working at the IG industry. And there, we were until December. And when the Russians were very close to there, so they shipped us to Buchenwald. So, and there we were separated from Elli and his father. But I was together with my brother, my father, and 3 of the uncles. And because they kept us taking us from Buchenwald, went to another small camp, and then back to Buchenwald, and from then we went to Theresienstadt. We were liberated in Theresienstadt.
You have a number from Auschwitz?
I have a number, yeah.
What's the number?
My number is 5901. My father's was 5900, and I was right after him.
And your other brothers and sisters?
My other, the 5 of them, the 4 sisters and 1 brother, they were killed in Auschwitz. Only the 3 brothers. My younger brother, he was liberated in Buchenwald. And 2 days before he was liberated, they took us to Theresienstadt, and I didn't see him until I saw him when I came to the United States, which was in 1955.
And when you were liberated from Theresienstadt, tell me what happened. Where'd you go from there?
Theresienstadt, well, my father was still alive, but he had typhus. And I took him to Prague. Theresienstadt is just about, I think, 50 kilometers from Prague. Took him to a hospital in Prague. And he was still there for 4 months. He survived for 4 months, and after that he died.
From typhus?
From typhus, yeah. There was no medicine, no medication. They couldn't help him. and he died in my hand. I was holding him when he died. And after that, I had to leave the hospital. Because until then, the reason they kept me there is because where I come from, we knew a lot of languages. Not perfect, but we knew a lot of, we could communicate with about 6, 7 languages. So he kept me there because all the people who came from all over, and it was like a transit camp. So I could communicate with a lot of these people. So after he died, the Russians took back that hospital were seven buildings. 6 of them were used by the Russian army, and 1 was used for the people who returned from the camps. So after the Russians took over that also, so I had to leave. And I was in Prague for a couple months. I didn't practically lived on the streets for a couple months.
How did you live on the streets?
Well, I was sleeping at the train stations, and there at least there was some food, because they were the eight people, the one who were aiding. They were bringing food. People who were aiding the people who transit. So there were food, and there's always a lot of people.
Were you with friends or
no, by myself. I had a couple of cousins, a couple of girls, and I was with them, but I couldn't stay in because they had a very tiny room, the 2 of them. So I saw them every 2-3 days, but I could not stay there. They did not allow me to stay there. So then this was in October. October, my father died. Not October, it was late in November or so.
November of 45.
45. My brother, who was in Russia, he found out that I'm alive, and my younger brother. But my younger brother was taken from Buchenwald to Switzerland because he had TB, and he was there, and he had finished high school, and then he came to the United States. But he knew that I'm alive, and 3 of my uncles are alive. So one of the uncles came, he lived in Budapest, and then he came to Prague. And my brother came to us, so we were united, the 3 of us. And we were entitled to get, because from the Sudeten, where the was ethnic, talking about ethnic cleansing, they got about 3.5 million Germans out of there, sent them to Germany. So we were entitled to get one of their properties. So we got a house and a grocery store and a bakery, the 3 of us. And so I lived there for probably about a year or so, not maybe less than a year. And
in your mind, when you're living there, how are you thinking, what are you going to do with your life?
That time, I didn't know. I was 20 years old, so I really didn't know too much what I'm doing. But when we started to congregate again, then I started to think different. Then I started to see what I wanted to do. In the meantime, the uncle from here, from the United States, whoever survived, they sent papers to us. And I got my papers in 46, and the Czech quota, which it was 19, I was right in the beginning. And after I got the papers, I really found out, and then started to think, I'm going to go to the United States, and then start a new life. But I didn't have enough money for the ticket. I had to wait. My brother was already here in the United States, and we communicated by mail. So he's supposed to send me some money, and then I had to wait for about 7 months for the ship, because the ship to come from Cherbourg, I think Cherbourg or Marseille, I don't remember where the ship went from. And the meantime, I didn't have too much. I was working as a baker for about 7 months.
How did you learn how to be a baker?
Well, there were some people who were working, and I was just helping. I didn't know how to, but I just remember how my mother used to bake, because at home, when I was a kid, we had a bakery at home. Baked the bread every Monday and the challahs every Friday morning. So I remember that. But we had a baker who did work there before. He was, not all the Germans were gone. Some Germans were still left there. So, but I was there for about 7 months, and then I got involved with the bricha, which I didn't have too much what to do. In the bricha, they were smuggling the Jews who came from Russia and Poland to get them to Germany. And I was
to Germany to go to Palestine.
Get to Palestine, yeah. From Germany, you go to Italy. From Italy to. So, and I was helping them, working with them, and then I started already the skirmishes in Israel and Palestine, and this was ran by the Haganah. So I decided to give up to come to the United States, and I volunteered to go to Israel, to the army. But this was still in '47. So they.
This was your decision by yourself?
No, my decision by myself.
What did you tell your brothers?
What I told my brothers, my brother was, we were not together that time. My brother was already went to Germany, from Czechoslovakia to Germany, and they lived I don't know, they lived at DP camp or separate, but they lived in Germany. I was still working at the border, helping them. They were training me in Germany for a little bit for the army. And after that...
What kind of training?
Military training.
Like
not weapons. And, fighting, judo. We were learning judo, because with knives, and exercising a lot. But we didn't have weapons. And then they took us to France.
What was your physical condition?
My physical condition was good. I was even in camp, when we were in camp, I managed to organize some food. I managed to steal, to go to
in Auschwitz?
And this wasn't in Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, we were only for a week. And this was in Buna, where we were working. And I somehow got a hold of a bread. I always, whatever I had, I brought to my father, because we were 7 of us there, including Elli and his father. I remember I brought the bread. It was like a brick, and he cut it in 7 pieces, and he gave everybody a little piece.
Who, your father?
My father. And I managed to, sometimes, in the infirmary, I was very tiny, very skinny. I might have been at that time 18 or 19, but I didn't look at it, so I looked like a young kid. So I went to infirmary and I stole a bottle of alcohol, because my father was always, this was his breakfast since I remember him. Every morning he had a little schnapps and a roll. This is what he had for breakfast. And he missed that. So I got a hold of a bottle, and we hid it. And every morning we used to give him a little schnapps. It was for breakfast. We used to get a little black bread and chicory coffee and a little margarine. This was the breakfast. And we lived only on 450 calories a day.
So you were a Chevraman. You were a clever kid who knew how to.
So I managed to do that. Whatever I could get a hold of. I used to go and stand in line twice for soup or whatever.
And they didn't catch you?
No. If they would have caught me, I would have been in trouble.
What's it like to play cat and mouse the whole time? Like everything you're trying to get around?
Your mind was always working. How can you get a hold of some food? Because that was the key, food. Because we have very little food. What was the food in the morning? Was it little bread and margarine. For lunch they had a soup, which it was practically not a soup. And for dinner you had the same thing, another piece of bread and a little piece of margarine. So you were always hungry. So your mind was always, how can you manage to get something?
And you were good at it.
I went sometimes I would. I didn't tell my father what I'm doing because he would have never agreed to, because if you are caught, you get killed. And so, but that's why I survived. And when after the war, I was still very strong, very skinny. But
I got to ask you a question, because as a survivor, from your perspective, so many people died, not just the ones who were killed, but just died because they couldn't survive.
Right.
How did survivors in the camps survive? What made survivors survive?
Just hope that tomorrow, that even we were in Ambuna, we could hear for months. We heard the bombs and the rockets from the war, because the Russians were not far away. And once in a while, we got some news, what's going on. We found out about the D-Day in France. So this gave us hope. This is sooner or later, it's just a matter of time that we are going to be liberated. We are going to, this what gave us, and who couldn't survive, died. And mostly younger people. But you see the Holocaust survivors right now, they are people like me. Because other people could not. Elli was my brother. If they wouldn't have had our parents, Elli had his father, and my brother had my father. They could not survive because they gave up. So, but if you have it hope, and somehow day by day, after every day, you are hoping that tomorrow is going to be liberated, like the Chabadniks believe in the Mashiach. Tomorrow the Mashiach is going to be here. And this is what we believed. And
but so many people physically just collapsed and died.
Collapsed, and the thousands of them, millions, and not only Jews. When we got to Buchenwald, they were not all Jews. In Auschwitz were Jews and Gypsies, but not only Jews, then a lot of them died. When we went on a march, and we went a few times on marches, you could see people that just collapsing and dying, and we just kept on walking. And
when you're seeing people drop dead in front of you,
yeah,
your natural instinct is to help them, to try and help them.
Yeah.
Here you just keep walking.
You couldn't, because the guard, the SS guard, if you just looked there on that body, you got hit. You just kept on walking. The obsession was so big with the Nazis, with the Germans, that nothing is more important than to get rid of the Jews, to kill the Jews. I remember a little story. We were once from Buchenwald, we went to a small camp. It was very, very hot. We were digging trenches for the bombers, and the bombers were passing us. Hundreds of them. It was black. The sky was black. It was very hot. And one woman, she was deaf, and she brought us water. And the guard told her not to bring water, not to give us water. He didn't let us give her, and she didn't hear. He killed her. He shot her. Because that's the instructions what he had.
You're living a very selfish existence at the time.
Well, everybody was selfish, yes, but if you had a family, you were a unit. But everybody was hoping that tomorrow it's going to be better, and looking for some extra food, whatever you can get. You
were in Auschwitz. You never saw Birkenau.
No, Birkenau was next to Auschwitz. Yeah, we arrived to Auschwitz. We arrived actually to Birkenau, I think. And from there we went to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz we were just about maybe a week or so until they placed us. They gave us the numbers in Auschwitz, and they placed us
in Buna. All right, let's go back to you're at the border. You're training to go to Israel. They're teaching you judo. They're teaching you knife fighting. In your mind, you're thinking to yourself, "This is what I have to do."
Right. From Germany, they took us to France. And Frank's a town which is called Saint-Chamond, next to Lyon. And there we were for 6 weeks, also waiting and training us.
How many were you?
I don't know exactly, maybe probably a few hundred, because that whole group, we went to Israel, and in the ship there were some 500 young people, boys and girls. So I don't think we were there 500 people, but probably I would say a couple hundred. But it's interesting, tell you a little story with that. I was involved in a shoe company. We were a distributor in the United States for the shoes, which is called Kickers. And they treated us, all of them, they had 26 distributors. And they treated us to a vacation, a 10 days vacation. And as we drive from the airport, from Lyon to the plant, I tell my wife, somehow this place is very familiar to me. I somehow have been here, or in a dream, I have been here. And then I recognized that there next to Saint-Chamond, where we were in barracks there, where they were training us for 6 weeks until we went to Israel.
Okay, when did you go to Palestine?
About 2 weeks after the liberation, after the state, around the end of May.
48.
48, I think it's around.
Yes, what'd you do?
Well, they took us, we came, and we docked, the ship docked.
How long was the ship ride?
Along the ship ride, I think 5-6 days, I think. Not too long.
From Cherbourg?
I think Cherbourg, or no, there's another one. Another port next to Cherbourg. Yeah, and we arrived near between Hadera and Atlit, and then we stayed there in the war. We left there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they brought us the first time the oranges. They brought us crates of oranges because we didn't see oranges for a while. And then they took us from there by little boats to Atlit. Atlit, there was an English camp, and they took us from there to that camp. And they gave us there some food and some shorts, like shirt, and let us rest for a couple, 2-3 hours until late in the afternoon, and then they took us out and they showed us how to use a rifle, how to load it, how to shoot. And 2 hours, 3 hours later, we were in the front, which I think it was Latrun, but I'm not sure. But I think it was Latrun because a lot of us died there. And after 2 days, they took us off because we didn't know anything. We didn't know how to handle it. And we gave us some rifles, gave some stands, and the stands were jammed most of the time. So it was tough. And then they trained us for a couple of weeks. And after 2 weeks, they sent us down to, we joined the Givati group, and we were in the Negev.
Back to this. They took you to Latrun because that was where there was immediate fighting, that they needed manpower?
Right, they needed to break through the road, the Burma road, and going to Yerushalayim. But I think this is what he told us, it's Latrun.
I want to go back a few. When you first got off the ship, what were your feelings?
I felt great. I felt the reason that's why I volunteered, because I gave up to come to the United States, and I wanted to help. I wanted to be part of it, part of what's going on, to create a Jewish state. Suffered a lot because of we were Jews. So there was.
Did you think of your family? Did you think
Think
of
of
the
the
Shoah?
family, think of the Shoah, think, sure, you always thought about it. It was still fresh in your mind. It wasn't 48, and just 3 years, exactly 3 years since we were liberated. So, and then I started to learn how to use rifles, how to use machine guns, and but slowly we started to get weapons. It was from Czechoslovakia came weapons, and we became soldiers.
Were you a good shot?
Yeah, I was a good shot, but
Well, how do you become a good shot?
well, it's a practice, training. They trained us also, and look, when you're 20 years old, you're still young. You have your steady hands, and I was not a sniper, but I was good in the target aim.
And what did you do in the Negev?
Well, the Negev, we had this. The Negev was surrounded by the Egyptians. And the Palmach, which were young kids, 15, 16-year-old kids, they sent them to break it through. And there also was a lot of casualties. And they were on the other side of the Negev, and we were on this side. So we tried to break through, and slowly we started to get already tanks and cannons and machine guns, and it didn't help. I can tell you about one mission. We were supposed to go, and I was called Shoah Shimshon. It was in a group of people when we were running around with jeeps, and we were selected, 18 of us, to go and break through how to do it. We went to Ben Gurion, came to give us the blessing. We were in Yafo for 3 days. They trained us for 3 days. And from there, we supposed to go, there was, I forgot, there was a ceasefire. And the ceasefire supposed to finish, I think it was in October the 30th or somewhere around October, and 12 o'clock in the midnight. And I'm giving you details, which, so there, we were trained for 3 days, and there we're supposed to go from Yafo to with a boat, with small boats. It was a fishing boat, to go to Ashdod behind the lines, and we were all armed with hand grenades and knives and pistols. There were 9 cannons there, and they were afraid, and this is what Ben Gurion explained us, they're afraid that these 9 cannons are very strong cannons, and they are going to stop the penetration. So we're supposed to land around 4 o'clock in the morning, not 4 o'clock, around 11 o'clock, just before the ceasefire ended. And there were 9 cannons, and the cannons were with the sandbags around it. And there were usually about 5-6 people attending each cannon. And we were supposed to come back from the back, blow it up with hand grenades, and attack, and then come back by ourselves. Because each two soldiers for each cannon. The problem was, the ocean the sea was so wild that we were never in a boat like this. We all became seasick, and we could not function, including the parliament, the ones who were running the boat. It was terrible. So we could not do it. So they pulled us back with a little tugboat and a plane. A couple of pipers were accompanying us, and brought us back to Tel Aviv port. And then they let us also rest and give us some new clothes, because we all threw up. was very messy. And then he took us back. After we rested, he took us back, and then we attacked again. And this is how we surrounded them. We surrounded the Egyptian army. And I remember Nasser was that time the commander. And there were 4,500 where we surrounded them. And this is how we broke through the Negev.
You destroyed all the cannons?
No, we did not. We could not get to the cannons because we became sick. We could not get off the boat.
You said they took you back there.
They took us back by boat. They pulled us back. They pulled the boat back. Another boat came and pulled us back from the ocean back to Tel Aviv. By 4 o'clock in the morning, we could not do it. So, but we did it. Then after a couple of days resting, we did go through, and then we had already tanks also, and we surrounded the Egyptian army, which I think was 4,500 of them. So,
when Ben Gurion came to bless you before the mission,
yeah.
Did you know who Ben Gurion was?
Oh yeah. I was a Mapainik. So I
You
knew.
were a Mapainik from when?
With philosophy-wise, I was not
From
organized. From when? From after the war. Because I was working with the Bricha, working with them. They were Mapainikis.
What was Ben Gurion like?
He was dynamic because he was on a pedestal. We kept him, and he came with. In fact, he came with some girls, soldiers, and asked them to take off their sweaters and give us, because they had nice sweaters, and gave us to because it was cold. It was like November, in October, November. So he brought vodka. So I saw him twice, and then I saw him once again on one of the I don't remember what the other one was.
Any other founding fathers of Israel that you saw?
Well, I have a little story. I saw Golda Meir. I was taking a tramp going from it wasn't at that time Telitvinsky, not Stella Shomer. It happened, I'll get to that. I was there also. I was wounded the second time. I was there for 3 months. So I was taking a tramp, and she stopped, picked me up, and I was going to Kfar Saba. She said, I can take you only to Renana, but she's going to visit my sister. So it's her Golda Meir. She dropped me off at Renana. And,
the guys that you were with, training with, fighting with, these were survivors from the Shoah? These were Israelis? What was the group composed
in the
of?
beginning, yeah, they were all survivors, all young people who survived.
What languages were you speaking?
Mostly Yiddish, Hungarian, depends. At that time I spoke a few languages, so we could communicate. But most of the time Yiddish.
But the training was being done in Hebrew?
The training was being done in Hebrew, yeah. At least I understood a little Hebrew. But they had to. If you go to Israel and to the army, you had to do it in Hebrew.
But I'm sure some of these survivors did not know Hebrew.
So they know that they ask questions. It was not such an intensive training like they do it today. So they did. It was a partisan army those days, and they spoke a little Yiddish too. The people, the one who was in charge, that there was a girl, a woman. She was from Israel, yeah. So
She spoke a little Yiddish.
Yeah, she spoke Yiddish, and I translated a little bit to like Hungarian. I could translate if there was maybe a couple people there.
Were you scared?
Sure, you're scared. If you're scared, if you're in the war, you're scared. War is a very, very nasty thing. You see, you always have to look out for your life. We had a lot of very bad, when we went the Negev, I remember a lot of people died. And a lot of people were wounded. We were 85 of us, only 16 or they died or wounded, only 16 survived. And I remember I was helping the doctor, he's from South Africa, how to bandage people. They showed. And then the battle was hand to hand. There were the Sudanese soldiers, black soldiers, and we were fighting with knives. So you're sure you're scared. And you're in a position you have to be, or you get killed or you kill.
How many did you kill hand to hand?
I don't know. I don't know if I killed anybody. I didn't. But you see the guy fell down, you went to the next one. So you don't know if they got killed or you stab them or what you.
You were a good knife fighter?
Yeah, the knife was good because this is what they taught us in judo, with knife. This was, today they have other things, but that time the judo was the big thing.
You're fighting in this war and you're seeing all these friends of yours in your group who are dying. You're thinking of the Shoah that you've just come through 3 years earlier, and you saw Jews dropping dead there.
No. It didn't occur to my mind because you're not a situation where you always have to protect yourself. There, in the Shoah was different. You always had to find survival, food. Right? Here, you have to protect yourself. If you don't protect yourself, you're going to be killed. So your mind is always how to outsmart the other guy, your opponents. It's a different battle, a different thing.
I'm asking on a emotional level. Are you thinking to yourself, how are Jews ever going to survive?
Yeah, you do think yourself. You had nightmares. I had nightmares for a year, for the 10 years. I had terrible nightmares.
What kind of nightmares?
I had nightmares that I was running around naked. And I had nightmares. It didn't relate to the Shoah or to anything else, but they were bad nightmares until they subsided. And so this had to do with the Shoah, it had to do with the army. Because I was wounded twice in the army. So, yeah, and when you are in the hospital, you have a lot of time to think.
You want to tell me the story about how you got wounded?
Now, the first time I was wounded actually once just in my arms with shrapnels, but the second time I had shrapnels in my eyes. So they had to clean my eyes, get surgery, get them out of there, and I was blindfolded for 8 days.
When did this happen?
In 48. It's right October, November 48. And then they sent me back to the unit. And I was with the unit probably until in middle of 49, in June or July 49. We took part in various missions, and some of the missions behind the line, what we used to do, we used to attack sometimes when they were relaxing, like when they had dinner, 6 o'clock, 6:30, we were fighting. They took us to the Mishulash. Mishulash is around Hadera and then there, and we were fighting the Iraqis. Iraqis were there. So we used to attack around when they had dinner with hand grenades and usually, and then get back to go through the lines, go back to the unit. And then we had a few missions like that. And then every time we came back from a mission, they gave us 2-3 days chofish. And everybody was smoking that time because they gave you a pack of cigarettes for every soldier every day. So, and I was leaning against a truck. And the guy went into the truck, instead of taking off, he backed up and I fell down, and two of the back tires was a 3 or 5 ton truck. Went through my body, which I still feel until today. And that time, they took me right away to the hospital. It was for 3 months there, because they had to pump out all the blood. It was pumped out for 4.5 liters of blood until then they got the transfusions. And then they kept me on penicillin for 6 weeks, but I still had to be in bed. So they kept me for 3 months in the hospital. They couldn't send me back to the unit anymore. So I stayed in Litvinsky, and I became a sapak.
What's a sapak?
Sapak is supplies, food supplies. I used to go every day with a truck, with a driver, to Sarafant or wherever the supply depots were, and bring the food for the hospital. And there was a bit of run, but mostly paraplegics were there. This was the second time.
When you're with your unit, you go on a mission, you come back, you've survived, you've accomplished your mission. What do you guys talk about?
Talked about the mission, talked about what we are going to do after the army, we talked about families, talked about the past, the history, we talk about what we young kids talk about.
You're 23 years old.
As I was 20 and 40, 23 years old. Right.
What are you saying, what you're going to do after the war?
Well, you see, I was on the way to the United States in 46, 47, because all my family was here. Everybody was here. So I figured after the war, I'll go and join my family, come to the United States. What I'm going to do here, what it's going to happen, I don't know. But I wanted to get together. So then I had to apply again. It took me 5 years until I got my new papers.
We'll get to that in a second. In the Army, what's a daily routine like, an average daily routine, or is there no such thing?
No, not in the war. Every day is different.
Where are you sleeping?
I was sleeping mostly in the barracks. And we were, when we were in the south, we were barracks or in tents, most of the time in tents. And when we were in a mission, sometimes we slept on the fields until sometimes we got stuck for a couple of days. We couldn't come back. So we had to survive on there. And I remember once we survived, 3 of us, we survived on little bananas for 3 days. That's what we ate. And once I remember we was in a vineyard. It had grapes. Once I remember he had only grapefruit, because he had the rations what you had, it lasted only a day or two.
Did you get sick? Did you have shul?
No.
Well,
I was very strong.
What was a regular food that you'd get in the Army?
The regular food was a lot of food. For breakfast, when we were in camp, you had salads, you had herring, cheese, bread, cereals, hot cereals, not cold, hot cereals. And it's a big selection. And for lunch, the lunch wasn't too much. Lunch was also a big lunch. But dinner, I think, was small. But we had no beef, but we had chickens. We had also in the morning for breakfast, we had eggs, or softball eggs, or scrambled eggs. So we had a big breakfast. And the lunch, and depends where you were. If we were in camp, I don't know what we had. We had hot dogs or whatever. But the dinner was regular dinners. And
did you get any time off to just relax, sing, dance, movie, or whatever?
Well, after we used to go on a mission, after every mission we used to get off.
And what'd you do?
Well, we went. I was always trying to do business. We were in the Eastern Front, and when the villages got empty, the Arabs ran away. So they had the fields. So I picked onions. They had about 3 sacks of onions. So I went to Haifa to sell them before Pesach. Had potatoes. And so this is what I did part of it. Some of it I went to Tel Aviv, and I had a distant cousin there. So I stayed there sometimes. But I had my brother. My brother had a very short time. He came also after the war. He came to Israel, and then from there he came right over to the United States. So while he was there, I used to go there to bring them a lot of food. I always managed to get food somehow. And I had chickens. I could catch chicken because he couldn't get food. In the army, we had plenty of food. But outside, there was no food, so I had to bring him.
Did you ever have go out with dates with girls?
Yeah.
Tell me.
I had one girlfriend, and she was interesting. When I was after they kept me in Talitinsky, and I was there, and it was on a weekend. And the weekend, that time there was no war, it was a ceasefire, the camps was empty, because the only skeleton crew, the military police and something, and I was the sapak, so I was in charge. Also, they had to stay there. All of a sudden, they brought 150 young Moroccan kids, and they came from the Atlas Mountains. They were very wild. They all had knives, and they left only food. The cook left food only for 30 people. And this is where we were there. And here 150 are coming, and they're hungry. And they all pointed at me, that I should turn to me for food. And I was afraid. I saw already a few of them got wounded already with the knives, and we had to take them to the hospital because some Talitinsky was that a military hospital. So I decided to go with the girlfriend. We went into the kitchen and started cooking, and this was Shabbat. I had a 90-liter big top and a lot of cans. There were a lot of cans. So I tried to make, and I learned this from my mother, to make a bean soup. So I opened a few cans and put a lot of onions and tomato and garlic. Made a big soup. Bread was plenty, and I opened cans that powdered potatoes, and they had big salmon cans. So I made salmon patties and potatoes and soup. Bread was enough, and gave it to them to eat. And everybody was happy, except next day, when the rabbi came, the mashgiach came, and he found out what I did, so he wanted to court-martial me. So the colonel, the charge of the camp, came, and I told him the story. It was pikuach nefesh. I could have gotten killed because they were very hungry, and I had to do it. He insisted that and then it went to almost to the chief of staff, and they released me because it was because I think Goren is the one. I think Goren was the chief rabbi. I went to Goren. Goren had to make a decision. He was the chief rabbi of the army.
All right, hold. Take a break right now because we have to switch. Okay, we're on? Oh, that was the one. You were saying that Rabbi Goren had to rule on your almost court-martial.
That's right.
Certainly they understood, pikuach nefesh. I mean, you had to feed all these kids.
Yeah, but you see, the mashgichim and the rabbis in the army, they just had uniform, but they were not. They're very pro-army people. But they went, their own way of thinking, and it's what's for them. It's more important that I was cooking a Shabbat. Yeah.
Reflecting the many religious problems we have in Israel today.
Right. That's even worse now, but
yes.
Because today you don't even have them in the army anymore. There are probably civilians who could watch it. I don't know.
No, there is a mashgiach in the army, but. You're fighting in the units. You have a sense of a mission that's bigger than yourself? Is it a question of, I survived the Shoah, we have to have this Jewish state because there's no place else to go? What are you thinking?
Yes, because, and that's the reason I volunteered. It's because if we don't win this battle, there's another Shoah going to come in the way. Because I was thinking the way people think today, that the next generation, the third generation, even for the people who are born after the war, like you people, and I have a partner with his son in the office. To them it's history, like the Churban of the Beit HaMikdash, or the destruction of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. It's the same, no different. Because it's history. It's in this when I was thinking that I'm also, because it will take only 1 or 2 generations until the Shoah will be slowly going to fade it away. And if we don't have a state of Israel to defend ourselves, if we can get to the same place where we were before. And that's why I sacrificed not coming, because most of my friend didn't go to the army, did not volunteer. Very few did. They came to the United States, went to Australia, went to wherever they went. So, and I think the same way I'm still thinking today. If not Israel, who knows where we would be today. We know what's going on in Europe now, what's going on in the rest of the world. And Israel's getting is the whipping boy now, because and not because it's Israel, it's because there's a Jewish state.
Do you fear that there'll be another Shoah?
It could happen. It could happen if we don't preserve Israel and make it as a Jewish state. Then that could happen, because the hatred to the Jews is not better than it was 100 years ago, 70 years ago. It's throughout history we had the problem. In every generation which it comes up, it's the same as the previous generations. And I still believe it could happen. And the only thing which it can save us is the state of Israel.
Go back to the you're cooking in the kitchen. Now this is 1949 already.
This was 49, yeah. This was already after I was not in my unit. I was in Litvinsky.
And the war ended, the truce, the ceasefire.
The ceasefire ended in 49.
And what did you do?
There was the ceasefire with Syria, with Egypt, with Jordan. I don't think it ever had a ceasefire with Iraq. And but the fighting didn't stop. The war stopped, but the fighting on all the fronts, from Egypt, especially Egypt, there was a lot of fighting, and the Golan. There was no Golan that time. There was no Golan. It was in northern Israel.
So what did you do then?
With my brother and some partners, we started a ceramic factory.
Where?
In Atanya. And I was one of the partners. And I was working there. And I was there until about 54. I was there from 50. I went out in the army in 50. Yeah, 53 or 54. And there we did also decorate porcelain. We bought porcelain, not decorated, just white or beige, and we decorated. And one of the decorators was my first wife. And we got married in Israel. But I was already on the way to the United States. I had already my tickets, my thought. So before I left, we got married, and then she followed me later. So for about 3 years, 4 years, I was working with the ceramic.
Why did you go into the lumber business like you had done as a kid?
The lumber business? Well, Israel was not a lumber country. There's not too much lumber to do there. Any lumber which you had to import, and it was not easy to import. And I was with that time. This was available, and this is what we did. And this was part actually. Supported by the Histadrut. So the Histadrut supplied the raw materials. And that didn't make a good living, but it survived. I did all right, but the rest, I wasn't married, but the rest of them did not do that great.
What was Israel like after the war in the early 50s?
It was like a naked country. You didn't have that much. That's what I just thought, even today, every time I go to Israel, I get more excited because I can see every 6 months, because I always remember how it was in 48 and what it became now. With all this, the fighting, with all the problems, with all the political problems, all the world problems, and to build a beautiful country. And so it's different. I see it different now than I saw it in 48. 48 was really nothing. When I went with Golda Meir to Ra'anana was a small little farm place. It's the chickens and whatever. And today is a city with 70,000 people. Big, beautiful city. Very nice. It's so every time I go, it looks to me a little bit different. I usually go to the new places.
When you see it now, what strikes you the most of the change in 62 years?
That became a country like the other countries with the achievements in every field of the field in science, or the field in the one thing which bothers me to see that the political situation and the religious situation, that there's no cooperation between no unity. This is what it. But otherwise, every field is exciting. So it came back to me. My wife told you we went to that museum in Tel Aviv, which is also from the Milchemet HaShichrur, and also. I was in 53, I was in the Imonim, so they took us up to the Mount Scopus. So I remember the cars they took us were armored cars, because so I saw the cars there, I saw the weapons which we used. So it's exciting, see how they look. Deteriorated, and that time they were giants, and big armored car was a big thing.
Did you get to Jerusalem at all during the Independence War?
To Jerusalem? In the war, no. After the war, I was in Jerusalem. After the war, after the army, I was traveling a lot. Went to Eilat, and Eilat is especially was nothing there really, but it's a very, very, very vibrant city.
What was it like going to Jerusalem for the first time?
Jerusalem was exciting. Jerusalem is Jerusalem. That's I'm not that religious to have such a big attachment to it, but I get the same attachment to Tel Aviv I'm getting to Jerusalem. But I'm getting attached to Israel. this is wherever I go. If it's Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or Haifa or Eilat, or that's where my attachment is.
So you came to America in 1954?
55.
55.
Yeah, October 55.
How did it feel to leave Israel?
Well, it was sad and good, because I had, the beginning when I came, we were 150 cousins and brothers, because everybody who survived, young, and we were young, everyone who survived, my uncle sent paper and brought them out.
150 cousins is
150
a lot.
cousins. Well, there's a lot of children. In Europe those days, the average family was 8 children or 7 children. So, and the younger people, they were anywhere between 20 and 30 years old. So we used to have families every month. We had a family circle. So we used to get together. So it was very, very exciting.
Your own personal Landsmannschaft.
Yeah, it's the cousins, which we knew each other, and not that many of them have survived, are still alive. But that was exciting, and to have this gatherings, picnics together. So that's a different world.
So you came to America in '55 because your uncle had gotten you visas.
Yeah.
And where'd you go? What'd you do?
Well, most of them came right here to Los Angeles, because my uncle was here in Los Angeles. My uncle happened to be my wife's father-in-law with their first husband. Yeah. So he sent me twice papers. First he sent me in 46, and then I neglected to use them, so he had to send me papers again after I got out of the army. So most of them we settled here in Los Angeles.
So did you have this feeling? Well, here I am 9 years later, but I finally got here.
Yeah, so it was 9 years. It was 7 years.
46 to 55.
48 to 55. You see, I was 2 years in the army, and 5 years after the army.
And how did you acclimate to America? How did you fit in? How did you try to fit in?
Well, it was hard in the beginning. You have to make a living, and I had a wife which I had to bring her out. So I did all kind of work. I started to work in the beginning as a night watchman, which after a few weeks I lost the job because I was in a town here where my uncle, the same uncle, they were building some houses, and some kids were trying to vandalize the house, and police came, and they ran away, and I was there. They caught me. So they took me to the police station. I didn't know too much English, but they called my uncle, and he sent out his son, which was her husband, to get me out. So they told him I cannot be a night watchman because I have to be a night watchman with a gun, and I'm not a citizen, so I cannot have a gun. So I lost my job. So then I became a laborer. I helped for carpenters also in the same place. And then I wound up the electrician. He needed some helpers. So I became a helper, and when I became an electrician for 5 years, I was an electrician until I went in business for myself.
In real estate?
No, first I was an electrical contractor. I was there for 15 years, a contractor, but I started to become a contractor in 62, and in 63 I already started building. While I was a contractor, electrical contractor, I was also involved in construction.
And how has life been for you in America?
Very good in America. After I went with the business, I had the first 6 months was rough, and then I learned the tricks, how to do it. So I really was fortunate. I as from the first year I started to make money, and my wife was here already, and started to grow a family. And
how many children?
I have 2 children. One lives in Israel. She has 3, and one lives here and also has 3. And now my wife has also 3 children and 5 grandchildren. No, 7 grandchildren.
You're sitting now here in Beverly Hills in 2010. You're a wealthy man.
Yeah.
You're
85.
85. You look back you're coming from a small town in Czechoslovakia, a little cheder boy.
Yeah, right.
And you become the American success story.
Yeah.
How do you look at your life?
I always tell my wife, I think I'm in heaven, because I've never dreamt to live until 85. I never dreamt to have what I have. I never dreamt to have of my wife what I have, because she's my life. And my children and grandchildren, the grandchildren, they adore us. And my children, and her children, it's like a dream coming true, because not everybody is so lucky and fortunate to reach to that what I have. And I believe what said in Pirkei Avot, mi ashir mi shesameach b'simcha. Yeah. So I'm telling this every day to my wife. I'm really very, very fortunate. And a lot of that I have to thank really to my wife. She's kept me going. You see, when we got married, her brother told her that she's giving me 10 years of my life to live longer. Yeah.
And you think back to the family that you lost in the Shoah.
Yeah. I always think about it. I have my father's Yortzat is coming up in a couple of weeks. He died 6 days before Rosh Hashanah. Not even a couple, 10 days. So I always think of them.
And as their son, you have made them proud.
I hope so. You see, I started to work with my father when I was 15 years old, and I was involved in many different things with him. At a little story which I can tell you. We worked on people's others, and not fictitious name. The businesses were transferred to non-Jew. Hungarians, they lived in Budapest.
So that you can go through the lines.
Yeah, no, that was Hungary. It was in 42, 43. And I used to go once a week, once in 2 weeks, to go to Budapest, and they had to sign the papers because any documents which had to be done. And I used to bring also the money for them. And the trip was 12 hours. From our town to Budapest was 12 hours by train. So I used to go with a sleeping car, and the bunk, there were 3 bunks there. And in that bunk, there was a SS officer, a civilian, and myself. And I didn't know too much. I was 15 years old or whatever. So in the morning, get up in the morning, so I go down, took out my tefillin and started to put on my tefillin. The German officer probably didn't know. He was an SS officer. He didn't know what I'm doing, so he didn't care too much. But the other guy realized that I'm Jewish, so he comes to me and tells me that he is Jewish. Where are you from? He's from Chernowitz. And in Chernowitz, the Jews were speaking German. So he says, "What? So as a Jew, how come you travel with an SS guy?" And they were traveling to Berlin. He didn't want to tell me why, but I'll tell you one thing which I promised my mother, that every Friday night I'll try to find challah and fish and put on a white shirt. So this is, but what he did with the German officer, I don't have the slightest idea. But I was so naive, I didn't think it's a big deal to even such a German SS guy to put on the film. I was 15 years old, so just a little side story.
You put on tefillin
Until the camp.
How religious are you today?
Not too religious.
What does that
I
mean?
belong to an Orthodox school,
Which shul?
by Jacob, which I happened, was the president, the vice president, was active there for a long time. But I don't consider myself an Orthodox Jew. I belong to an Orthodox congregation.
What kind of a Jew do you consider yourself?
A very loyal, good Jew. I would say for the last 40 years, I worked more for being Jewish than for my own business, for my own family. I'm involved in schools. I started at 2 high schools. I was the president of another high school. They were all Orthodox. I was active in my shul, which I was for 3 years president there. So, and right now I'm active very much with the Jim Joseph Foundation. So I do a lot, and I'm working with APAC. I consider myself a very, very good Jew.
Why did God put you on this earth?
I don't know. Does anybody know? Does anybody know? I bet your picture of God is different than my picture or his picture. Anybody is a different. It's like the Mashiach. Nobody knows. I don't know why. I don't know how we exist and what it creates. That's Einstein couldn't figure it out.
What do you personally believe?
I believe like the national Jews, cultural Jews, traditional Jews, very traditional. I keep the holidays. I keep the everything, and I'm very supportive in a lot of institutions. And whatever it's surround me, everything it has to Jewish. It's Jewish.
Do you have any regrets of your life?
If I have any regrets, I don't know at which part of life, and I cannot think of any regrets because I had so many successes in spite of what I went through. And I contribute a lot of my successes has to because I went through all these things. I grew up through those hard times. I became tough. I became independent. So what regrets can I have? I don't know. I'm really consider myself a very happy person. I'm happy with my fortune, what I have, and what I did, and what I still do.
What are you proudest of having done in your life?
First of all, being in the Israeli army is I'm very proud of, because I feel I did contribute a lot to the state of Israel by just being in the army and fighting in the wars. Very proud of that. I'm proud of my children, because I think I produced excellent children and grandchildren. And I'm proud of my wife. And of my achievements. I think what I achieved in my life. But every day I'm getting up every day, and I tell my wife how fortunate I am, and how proud I am what I did and what I do.
Is there anything you would have done differently?
hindsight, there's always something. There's a lot of things that I would have done differently. You learn from life. And if you don't learn, you repeat it doing this thing. But I did a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of bad decisions, but this is part of life. If you don't take the chances, you don't progress. So the regrets, I don't know what I don't know what I could have done differently what I did.
How would you like to be remembered?
As a good Jew, and a good husband, a good father. This is what I don't take for granted these things. And I'm very proud of a lot of things that I do, and I did it sincerely, and I did it with love, whatever I did, and I still do.
When you said, my view of God is different from your view, of course, but you believe in God?
Yes, I believe in it, definitely. But I didn't know I got back, I support Chabad. I don't believe in their philosophy because it's special towards Israel or Zionist. But I support them because they do a lot of good humanitarian things. I was in Moscow, and I decided to go to the synagogue with my partner. And as I walk into the synagogue, somebody from the women's section comes down, she yells out, "Mr. Slomovic, Mr. Slomovic." So I looked at my partner, who knows me in Moscow? Because that time I tried to do some business in Russia. Who comes down? The Chabadnik Rabbi Kunis son from here, from Los Angeles. And he shows me what he did there, that he do there. It's amazing. It was a Thursday, and he had 7 women there cutting their fish and meat and giving out for 450 people, over 85. Every Shabbos, they're giving, Thursday, they're giving out something for Shabbos. So I asked him, Levi, how long are you going to be here? He said, then the Mashiach comes. He said, then you're going to go home tomorrow? I said, no, I'll go home today. You see, you ask the question, you see, everybody believes whatever they have the picture of it. How God is a human being? God cannot be a human being. But somebody creates, something had to do with the creation, what is created. I don't believe that God created in 6 days the whole world. So,
what question will you ask God when you see him?
well, I would ask him mainly first about the Shoah. How could God look at and let this happen? And if God does everything, how come then God created it? So this was my first question, because it touched me. I lost a lot of people. I lost my parents. I lost 5 of my siblings. The grandparents, granduncles. I had my great-grandmother there, who when we went to Auschwitz, she had 140 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. 140. And 90% of them were gone. This would be my question to God. I know I'm not going to get an answer, but and this is what I still think about.
Do you have any answer?
And that's why I come back to the first question. I see God differently. I don't think God gets involved in everything. I think God did not send on all those rabbis to tell me what to behave, what to eat, and what not to do. I don't believe in that. But God is not involved. There is a God. God probably created what we created and left it up to us. We have to manage ourselves, and if we cannot manage, tough luck. This is this is my philosophy.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
Is there anything I didn't ask you about your life that I should have asked you?
No, it's probably, look, there's so many things. Like the first time when I got the other interview, I was thinking after it was finished what I should have said.
Right.
I said, that look,
It's always good.
I'm 85 years old. I lived a long life. A lot of things happened in my life. You cannot remember every detail. Even now, a few things popped to me which I didn't even talk about it before. I did not think about it. It just came back to me, like the with the food with the mashgiach, and it popped to me.
Anything about Milchemet HaShichrur, the Israel Independence, War of Independence? Anything about that war that you went through, experienced, that I didn't talk about with you?
No. That war probably is the most important war Israel would ever had and ever fought, because if not this war, Israel would have been. I have certain things which I don't want to talk on tape, but it happened because in the unit which I was, we might have done certain things which it shouldn't have done.
But every army, everybody has.
Yes, but it shouldn't be on tape. I can tell it to you personally, but not on tape. Yeah.
But everything else about the war we covered?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now we'll the pictures from the war.
Okay, in this picture, can I show it with my finger? This is me in the middle right now, holding the rifle. And to the left of me, to the right of me, this dead soldier, his name is Berkovich. And we were together in the battle which I was telling before, Elli, that we had to break through the Negev.
Yes.
And a lot of them, the people got wounded and killed.
Right.
He got in an hysteria, and he got it like a nervous breakdown. And I had to go and slap him quite a few times. In fact, I beat him up. And he got out of it because I needed help, because we were helping the doctor to bandage the wounded soldiers. Mm-hmm. And I needed his help. So him I remember. The other two, I recognized them, but I don't know. I know the middle one, the tall one, is a Hungarian. And I used to interpret for him in the beginning the Yiddish or the Hebrew. And the other to the right, I think, I don't know exactly. I remember him, but I don't remember his name.
And when was this picture taken?
This was taken right after that war, after the second ceasefire, approximately, when we were already back in camp. We were that time in tents. We were living in tents.
What kind of gun are you holding? And what kind of a gun is that you're holding?
I think it was a machine gun, a Czechoslovakian machine gun, which I was holding. I was carrying that time a machine gun, and I always also carried a radio on my back, but I don't have the radio on me now.
Was that a heavy gun?
Yeah, it was. It was. I think the gun was about 13 kilo. Because with ammunition or without ammunition, I don't know. The guy who was to my, the first guy, he has. I think that's a stand which he's holding.
How many rounds of bullets would you say you shot from your gun?
In my gun, we had rolls. Every roll had 50 bullets, and I had a helper who was carrying them. He had a cassette, which there was probably a few hundred in there, or on the shoulders. I was carrying, he was carrying, and we kept on loading. He was loading, I was shooting, and he was loading.
And that's what you took every time you we were fighting on the ground. In other words, you didn't take that to the sea when you had to do that operation behind enemy lines?
No. There we didn't go with guns. There we went only with hand grenades and pistols and knives.
When you look at this picture and see how young you are then and what you were doing then, what do you think?
Well, I was a young kid. I was, you see most of them, but you look there, they're all approximately the same age. We probably came the same boat to Israel too.
These are all survivors from the Shoah?
Yeah, they also, most of them. I don't know of anybody who was not a survivor. Some of them were not survivors, were not in camps, but they were survivors. They came back from Russia or from Poland, and they joined us.
They talk a lot today about how the survivors from the Shoah were used in the sense they came over, they barely survived, now they're being thrown into a war as soon as they get off the boat, not even speaking the language.
Right.
Do you feel that?
Yes, but there was no other choice. You see, that was a matter of survival of the state of Israel. You see, if we would not have, imagine if the caravan to Yerushalayim would not gone through, the whole city would have been starving. That war, like I said before, was probably the most important war Israel ever fought or ever will fight, because this is the first survival, because the odds were very, very slim that time. You had 7 countries attacking Israel, armies. Israel didn't even have an army. They were refugees like us.
When you look at that picture, you see that young 23-year-old.
Right.
Do you think it's somebody else, or you feel what you remember?
No, it's I don't know. It looks like me, but I remember. I don't remember when we took this picture, but I remember the time I was there. The time when we arrived to Israel. All this is fresh in my mind.
People who fought in the war talk about the fact that they didn't think about themselves, they only thought about the collective. Is that true, that where you didn't think, oh, I'm missing this, I don't have that?
No, I don't think. See, when you are really in the battle, you think of yourself, because you have to decide, are you being killed or you are going to kill? The people who interpret the war, interpret this, they haven't been there. They don't. It's very hard to put yourself in a condition, but what the real soldier is thinking when you stand in front of your enemy and he's trying to kill you. So collective, it's sure you think of collective, but first you think of yourself.
Okay, let's do the other picture. Tell me about this picture.
I'm just this is a picture that was taken right after the army, after when I was in Israel. But I don't think this is how I looked when I was 23 or 24 years old.
Pretty good looking.
Still had a full head of hair.
It's hard. You look at this picture and to think that 3 years earlier, you were in a labor camp in Auschwitz.
Right. Not 3 years, 5 years.
5 years.
5 years, yeah. Right. That's right.
Here you look healthy. You look strong.
I really felt healthy all along. I never felt sick. I was just. I remember the last. I didn't tell you the story. The last trip when we went from Buchenwald.
Yes.
I had a boil on my foot, and I went to the infirmary, and the doctor gave me a note that I cannot continue on the march because we started with the march. So my father took the note and gave it to my brother because he knew that he's not going to make it. And I had a boil, but I was still healthy. So luckily, after 2 days, he was liberated by the Americans, and we still had to continue for another month. But otherwise, I never remember being sick.
How did you make it with a month with the boil?
My father was a surgeon. I had a few times. It happens also going from Auschwitz to Buchenwald in the train. I had a boil on my neck, and he somehow opened it with a knife and bleeded it out. And same thing he did on my foot. Took it out, got the pus out, washed it out, and it was gone. Still have the scars here, but anything else?
No, we're good.
Okay, thank you very